watch the creative people because they are so far ahead of us in terms of possibilities and creative thought. When you feel stuck, go and look at something creative that someone else has made because it will help to unstick you. And actually, we have this idea that creative people, often starving artists living in garrets, but they can still create incredible beauty and senses of abundance in other ways. So that kind of context is where I grew up. But because all of the money we had that went into absolute essentials, like having the electricity connected, that was a big day. I still remember that. Having the underground water connected, lots of really fundamental things that we needed.
Money is never just about money. It's about who we are, what we've been through, and the systems we live within. And that's what we talk about here on the Money Story Project. I'm Harriet Formby, a chartered accountant, fractional CFO, and trauma-informed finance coach. I work with mission-led business owners who are changing the world for the better. This podcast is not about glamorized rags to riches tales. It's not about fixing our so-called flaws, and it's definitely not about quick fix finance hacks and the latest gimmick. We invite people to tell their own money stories. We also bring in subject matter experts who share both their lived experience and their professional wisdom, helping us make sense of what we've carried and our path forward. Today, I'm joined by Kirsty Anna Sinclair. Kirsty is a UK business astrologer, writer and broadcaster who guides female founders as they navigate the balance between busy lives and disruptive ambition. She's the creator of Sky Insider, an innovative private podcast redefining how female founders approach their business day. Before this, Kirsty built a rich and varied career. She founded a wellness centre, had a career in education, and has openly shared her own story of burnout after teaching. Experiences that deeply inform the work she does today. I'm really excited to have Kirsty with us. A big welcome, Kirsty.
Well, thanks, Harriet. Really excited to get into the subject of money.
It's really, really good to have you here. So let's start with a check-in. When I say the word money today, I'd love to hear what feelings or reactions are coming up for you as we settle into this space.
Money today. Well, I feel like we're on the precipice of a whole brand new story, potentially, particularly around females and money and access to money, agency with money, wisdom around money. Rather, money specifically, not just the wider sense of resourcing and making tiny bits of money stretch, which has always been our specialism in a corner of, making small amounts of limited, finite things stretch as far as they will go in the caretaking sort of context. I feel as if money has brand new ways for us to work with it. But for that to start happening, I think we have to start thinking about it differently and talking about it differently, and perhaps releasing ourselves from any emotions that we have around it and just see them and hold them up without shame or that weird secrecy that has gone on around money for a long time. So I feel like there's lots of potential. There's all sorts of things to play for now with money.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds like a really sort of positive outlook on it, and the kind of value in looking at what's gone on with money and maybe how we want to, relate to it in the future with a outlook that we can reshape things.
Yeah.
And we know that how we relate to money is actually shaped by a lot of stuff. It could be around kind of family, upbringing, culture, community, sometimes even kind of life experience or traumas. So I've got quite a wide question really, which is just to invite you to share a bit around how you relate to money, moments or messages that stand out for you in your journey so far.
There are quite a lot. If I do a couple of bounces within my personal timeline, just pick out a few vignettes, like significant moments. I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Australia. I come from a long line of sort of pioneers and creative people And I think there's no better illustration of that than to explain that when my parents returned to Australia, having had 2 daughters here, and decided to set up a brand new life in a brand new town, they didn't go and buy a house. They bought land, and my
Mm.
dad went at it with a machete and a chainsaw, and they drilled for water. And once they had water, they knew that it was okay to buy it. And my
Wow.
dad built a big shed that we lived in for a couple of years until the house next door was finished. And he built the house himself. So I watched both of my parents use a lot of debt, a lot of borrowing, and a lot of fears about money to propel them into having to create family resources from what they had, often in very ingenious ways,
Wow.
but always we had periods of living in quite, I think now, quite severe rural poverty without running water, without electricity, without sanitation, and all of that stuff. And it's not coming from a poor me perspective. It's more, I really do know what it's like to have or to feel as if you have nothing. And so
Yeah.
that formed a big part of my childhood narrative. And yet, in many other ways, we were very rich. It felt like we were rich. My parents both valued culture. As children, we were taken to lots of theatre performances and involved in lots of creative things. Again, and all of that done on an incredible budget. Both my parents were involved in local amateur dramatics, and my mum was a makeup artist and did hair design, and my dad built stage sets and stuff, and all
Wow.
of
Wow.
this with minimal budget or no
Wow.
budget. So what I associated creativity with was a tool where money was absent. Where money was absent, you had creativity of thought. And that is a theme that's carried on through my life. If you don't one thing, you might have a bit of the other. And actually, we
Mm.
have this idea that creative people are often starving artists living in garrets, but they can still create incredible beauty and senses of abundance in other ways. So that kind of context is where I grew up. But because all of the money we had that went into absolute essentials like building the house, having the
Yeah.
electricity connected, that was a big day. I still remember that. Having the underground water connected to the house, lots of really fundamental things that we needed. My mum particularly used to squash her needs or her desires. And we often see desire around money and things that money can buy as almost being a bit grubby.
Mm.
And so there's this tendency to sort of do things on the quiet and not really talk about how much money we might spend or want to spend on ourselves. I remember my dad complaining about the cost of my mum's haircuts. My mum would cut my hair herself. I had the classic 70s fringe that went like that.
Yeah.
We had one pair of shoes for school and one other pair of flips, I think, for home and the weekends. And that was kind of it to a large extent. I never felt at the time, like we really went without. I noticed my mum trying to get dressed in secret. And after a while, I noticed that she actually had safety pins in the back of her bras where they were starting to fall apart. And she just didn't feel like she didn't work. She was a homemaker. And my dad was the main breadwinner. And so my mum would take me shopping with her sometimes, and we would sneak into the perfume shop, and she would have a little tiny squirt of like Misty Ore or something. Did say to me, "Oh, smell this." She was, "Smell this." I've got Venus in Capricorn. I love the sense of it's not
Yeah. No.
about something being expensive. It's about something quality where incredible craftsmanship has gone into something. She says, "This. Oh, that's really nice." She said, "Yeah, don't tell." And there'd be a sort of conspiracy around things that were expensive or had a sense of luxury. So there was almost a sense of don't um, don't include any senses of luxury or quality in your everyday. It's something that we hope we dream of having. The desire is there, but it's hidden,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's
almost
kind of
like it's
not
out
okay
of
to want it.
reach. It's
Yeah,
sort
and
of
it's
like,
definitely out of reach.
yeah,
Mm.
it's you can desire it, but you've got to keep that hidden because
Yes.
it's not really acceptable maybe to, yeah, to actually have these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember that every now and again my mum would buy her some herself something, or she'd kind of hide it. I knew that she hid it at the back of the cupboard. I was one of
Mm.
those annoying kids who hears most of the adult conversations and notices everything that goes on. And she'd
Mm.
sort of hide things and then maybe bring them out a few months later. And I knew that she'd put them on a credit card and chipped away and paid them off really slowly, and agonized over just spending money on herself. And and I think that played out again if we jumped way forward in my timeline when I then became a parent myself. I found myself doing the same thing, almost a sense of shame around guilt or shame around spending money on something that was a non-essential, but
Yeah.
something that I loved or something that made me feel good. And it's been a long time to sort of work on that and to not feel any sense of guilt around, or I must actually sacrifice my own desires because somebody else always will need this more than I do.
Mm.
And I think that was a theme that carried on quite a
Yeah.
long time.
It's interesting where you said as well that like there was probably a very real reason to be almost, maybe if it was when you're growing up around being careful because like you've got the example of like we had to build this from the ground up and each improvement like putting the electric in and different bits is like it must have taken money to get together and I guess it's that contrast, isn't it, of like we need to get the basics in place and the luxury type of things would conflict with that. It's almost like it is out of reach, but it's beautiful that image of kind of like I know we talk about the starving artist trope as a negative thing because it can put a ceiling on what you can have as it can put a limit on what people feel they can have as a creative because they shouldn't
Mm.
want more. But it's also really beautiful to think that you had, the sense of like rural, you know, poverty, but that contrasting with like a beautiful stages and makeup and performance and you mentioned something about you can be creative and then you can create possibility even if the money's not there. Go
Yeah,
on that a bit,
yeah,
yeah.
I do really love that, and something I would like to think is possible is we start to think very differently about the value of creativity, and it's
Mm.
something something I'm starting to write about a lot more at the moment is the value of creative skill when you're running a business, because creativity is a way of being that can apply to so many different things that we do, whether it's cooking with what you've got left in the fridge or how to, um, how to sort out an emergency situation in the right way or in the most, equitable way. Creativity is just, it's something that is showcased a lot in what I do. There's like one day a week that partially showcases and prioritizes creativity. And when we think about all the different aspects of it, I think it's sort of underplayed. And I
Mm.
think when you're in the world of entrepreneurship, we do need to apply ourselves, and we talk about wearing different hats all the time. But it would be really nice to think that the role of creativity in the broader sense starts to become valued and we start to build that within ourselves. Because apart from anything else, creativity as a practice is a great escape. It's
Yeah.
very, very good for your brain health to be doing something recreational or something where there are all sorts of possibilities in front of you for unlocking other parts of your mind that have become stuck on functional freeze when it comes to a problem or a worry that you've had over a long period of time. So I just think creativity has been underplayed. But also, I don't like to think of creativity and money as being mutually exclusive. I don't think they are. And I think we need to sort of bring those together and see the value of their amalgamation. I don't know if you've ever read the book Signals by the economist and advisor Pippa Malmgren, but she's very good at making economic predictions.
No, I haven't
And
come across that, but yeah, it's
one of the
interesting.
ways that she talks about looking at futures in the economy and what is likely to happen in terms of collective human behavior is watch the creative people, because they are so far ahead of us in terms of possibilities and creative thought. When you feel stuck, go and look at something creative that someone else has made, because it will help to unstick you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And there's that idea of when systems need to change, we can't just incrementally build on them. We need to like reimagine what's possible. And that is totally the domain of creative thought process, isn't it? To kind of come up with something new that hasn't been thought of or done in that way before.
Yes. And I know that wherever I've seen your profiles come up, you use that word, reimagine. It seems to be like something that you is sort of reimagining. Is it about reimagining finances or reimagining
Yeah, I
economy?
think the reason it's that word is because my intention is it evokes a different state. It creates like the possibility rather than just thinking about what we've got now and how we can incrementally do this or that better. It's inviting all the things that come to mind when you say reimagine. Like for me, that sparks loads of different like images and thoughts and stuff and possibilities and different strands. And I think that's it's a good state to be in, isn't it? When we're feeling like possibilities are open and how we, different ways of looking at
Yes,
stuff.
definitely. It's a complete energy switch, isn't it? To be in an expansive and curious state of mind and think, okay, the situation I'm in right now is really bad, whether it's about money or perhaps it's something else, but what else is possible?
Yeah.
My postgraduate was in careers guidance, and the big focus on that year was in learning interview skills with people to get them to talk about careers and about themselves. And in the developmental phase of the interviews, the idea was always to encourage that person to be in that flow state, that creative state of mind, that expansive and curious state of mind, rather than fear about the unknown future. And to say, okay, well, what else is possible about this, and what else is there, and to support someone through that period of I don't know, and then something often drops in.
Yeah.
Something else often drops in if you give space and time and support to.
That's
So
so
yeah, that
interesting. Yeah.
creative state is a very, very interesting one.
I've not thought
Mm.
about that because it could be like an interrogation when you're giving, supporting someone through that conversation. You're kind of putting, what are you going to do with your life? And they're like, I don't know. And
Yeah, it's often a horrible way that people start off. They sort of come to you, say, tell me what I should do. And then you work together to break that down, trace
yeah,
it back to where did those questions start and what was going on at the time. And, tell me about these, all the different aspects of you, the bits that you think aren't important or don't have a role here. Tell me about
yeah,
everything. Because we always have more to us than we think we do.
yeah.
And that includes capacity for creativity. Mm.
Have you got any other sort of stories or times
Yeah, I would
you'd like to talk
definitely.
about? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, I shared this one on LinkedIn, so I think you probably know about it. There was a point where I took a break from teaching through necessity, really. I'd been teaching in the UK. I trained in Australia and I'd been teaching in the UK about 7 years. And I relocated to the West Country and started doing supply teaching. And I suddenly had a phone call from the local authority and they said, I'm afraid we can't employ you. And I said, why is that? And they said, well, you were trained abroad, which means that you don't have qualified teacher status here. And you should never have been teaching all this time. Very interesting. Oh, see? I notice people start to cough sometimes when something comes up that was like significant or is significant now.
Yeah.
And that was a real shock to the system. I had a mortgage at the time and I was very worried instantly about what I was going to do. I got some part-time work and I signed up to retrain as an aromatherapist. And then once I'd finished that training, which was amazing, my partner at the time had a building that had commercial sort of planning permission. and he was looking to find somebody to let it or whatever. And I had this brainwave at the end of my course. I said, why don't I just open up like my own version of Neil's Yard? That would be fun.
Yeah.
And it just sort of, the idea just took off. And so I did. So I ended up running a wellbeing centre, which was amazing. And I loved it. And I loved it. And I was young and I ran around all the time every day. And I worked on the front desk 6 days a week. Spent 2 or 3 years always talking to the general public about their problems. They would come in all the time saying, oh, I've got this thing wrong. The doctor doesn't think it's important, but I don't feel very well. And I spent a long time listening to people and becoming awestruck at the different human differences, the different kind of types of solutions that work for different people. There is no one way to make ourselves feel better. And yeah, so it was an amazing time and I loved it. And then I unexpectedly fell pregnant. It was not planned and really wasn't on my bingo card for where I thought my life was going to go. And of course, my business was still in its early years. It was flourishing, but it was still young. And at that time, I split with my partner and I suddenly I ended up going to stay with a friend and I was living in her box room. I was feeling really peculiar and I thought, this has been going on for a while. I remember falling asleep in the shop with my head down on the desk. Turns out I was pregnant. And yeah, so I thought, right, about face. This is big. And I didn't feel, I just felt like this is a complete split from what I thought I was going to do to what I am going to be doing now. And so I had to close the wellbeing centre and suddenly that was my income gone. That was my career gone. I couldn't go back to teaching, I thought at the time. So I very suddenly, my life went from running a business, being hugely successful, loving what I did, to living on benefits. And at the time, it's quite a while ago, it was over 20 years ago. And I still think sometimes this is the case. If you are privately renting, tenants sometimes even with young children or babies, but also any tenants on benefits are not considered viable applicants for a rented property. And I discovered this after I just blithely walked into 3 estate agents and said, oh, I'm pregnant. I need a place for 2 bedrooms. And yeah, I'm going to be in receipt of housing benefit for a while, until I can get back to work again. And they all said, well, we can't help you. And I was absolutely astounded that that was the case. And I know why, because since then I've also been a landlord, so I understand what the flip side is as well. But this was my storage time. And I thought, okay, we're down to survival here. What am I going to do? And I put a very big jumper on and I went into the independent estate agents that was round the corner. And I lied and I said, hi, I need to rent a 2-bedroom house because I run a business, which was still running at the time. Business was still alive and well. And I said, so I need an extra room as an offer. Can you help me? Oh, they were delighted to help me. And so that was the story of how my life completely changed overnight, but also how I found out just what it feels like to be what people have referred to as a single mum on benefits. It's almost like that's one word.
Yeah.
And had to create a very different feeling for my life to the one that the society might have liked to have given me and other women like me. There was a long battle over all kinds of things to do with finances over those very early years of my daughter's life, which sometimes overshadowed the joy that new parenthood brought into my life. I never even wanted to be a mum. Like I just wasn't even on the agenda. And So the whole thing took me by surprise, and I was just surprised by the joy of it. And that it was like having a new love affair. But it was totally overshadowed by concerns about finances and having to go into battle repeatedly in various different situations for the resources that we needed just to be able to live until she was in nursery and until I was in a position to start again, which I did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that was hard because it was just having to shut out so much noise about women and money and about the stigma that sits around receiving money that you haven't done something to earn. And so that affected my personal concepts around receiving for a very long time. And yeah, I look back at that woman that I was with such compassion because I just think, wow, that's such a journey that you've got in front of you. And of course, when I much later went back into teaching, I found my way back in and then left teaching and then was starting a business. This is all these memories from 20 years prior. I didn't have time to be sad that I had to close my wellbeing center overnight. Didn't have time to be sad or celebrate the things that went right. And I didn't have time to even sort of process how difficult it had been, being under-resourced and, having to use creativity to address so many difficulties around all of that. And having to have the resilience to shut out the public narrative around people in receipt of benefit. And even now, we have, I think I wish I knew the exact statistics, but I know it's around half of working people now are in receipt of some kind of financial support from the government. And the rhetoric that is everywhere still about people receiving financial support that they haven't done something to earn.
As if raising a child does not work when it clearly is, by definition, you're putting a lot of effort in and hours.
And she becomes a future taxpayer.
Exactly.
She's
So
on
from
her
that
way
point
to
of
do
view.
that.
Yeah.
But you don't, or I didn't tell myself any of those things back then. I just sort of tried to hide from news and, the very difficult things. And also I was a long way away from families and I wasn't very well personally resourced. I had lovely friends and it actually turned out to be an incredibly happy time in so many ways that I wasn't expecting. But both my parents had said to me, oh, you can come home to Australia if you want to. But I knew I'd be living in the middle of nowhere and the situation for single mums on benefits in Australia is even worse, or it was then, even worse than it is now. So, it was a very, I guess that was one of the most significant moments for me around my worth, being worthy of receipt. And and that feeling of almost, how people are really disgusted about the idea of laziness and lack of productivity, not doing anything. And I grew up in a culture that was very much like that. In Australia, the expression in the 80s that used to be around for anyone in receipt of benefits was being a dole bludger, being on the dole, like you've done nothing to earn that. You're just being lazy. Yeah.
And
It's
you
a
came
really
from,
interesting one.
You'd been really creative and resourceful when you were sort of blocked from teaching and you were like, right, I'm going to throw myself into like the wellness, retraining, which a lot of people would have maybe struggled with, setting up the wellness center, which is really ambitious because it's like, and taking on premises is always like a big commitment. And
I don't think I'd do it again, but I had loads of energy then. Yeah. And it was actually also really exciting.
Yeah,
It was
sounds
so
really
exciting.
fun. And you go from being like, kind of, you're just you, like we're always just ourselves, but then the identities crash because one minute you're like, oh yeah, Kirsty, she runs this wellbeing center, and the next minute you're being when you went to the estate agents, they're kind of judging you because you're pregnant, and like suddenly you're not a business owner who's like really amazing at what they do. You're like, oh, she's going to be on benefits, and this is now what we think of, and you're just you.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
nothing has changed. It's just the
Yeah.
labels, isn't it? It's the labels
No.
and the judgment that happens, and the fact that people don't consider that somebody in that position is loads of different things as well. Like they don't look wider than just the immediate label always, and it's really a missed opportunity in one way to judge people like that, but it's also really harmful to the individuals. Not just obviously, like it sounds like you got by because you were resourceful and connected. You made connections with people and you made a good time of it, but like it's sad that that has to happen, that people create this judgment and make life difficult when, yeah, they don't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's true. And I think it's also just lack of experience. A lot of people don't really understand until you've been in the system, until you've been a number in that system, until you've been having to explain what you've been doing with your life for, however long, to an external authority who's always leaning on you to be slightly different. Like, yes, of course, I believe that if you can work, I think that you need to, because I think we all need to find ways of exchange and contribution. But there will always be people in our society that won't be in a good position to earn the money that they need. And we will always have vulnerable people in our society. And I, for one, am extraordinarily grateful that there is a system in place, even though socially it was hard. I am extraordinarily grateful that there is a system in place to protect people when life doesn't go in the direction that you think it's going to. People have accidents, they become ill. They have partners who become ill, have accidents, or who die. People's lives change all the time. And I think the value of that system and how we talk about it as well says a lot about us as a culture and as a country. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
For those of you listening, if this episode is resonating, please do leave a review and make sure you are following wherever you get your podcast from, so you'll be the first to hear when the next episode lands. And if you know of a pal or a business friend who would enjoy this conversation as well, please forward it on to them, tell them all about it so they can enjoy it as well. Okay, let's get back to the conversation. You mentioned as well that almost like you didn't get a chance to process it at the time, but then when you kind of went through being in teaching again and then leaving teaching and then starting to set up your business you're running now, what came up basically then? What were the kind of things that were emerging for you as maybe limitations or thought processes?
Yeah, lots of things came up. I was afraid to start. That was one of the first things that came up. I was afraid to start because I thought, what if this just goes again? What if this happens again? What if something happens to me? And, what if? And it took a long time to uncover that because I think it had been buried for such a long time. So there was, what if something happens to me? Because there is that sense of vulnerability as an entrepreneur. If you're we talk about having a personal brand. If you are the business, you are a company of one. If something happens in your life and you suddenly have to take a step back, then what? So there's that sense of vulnerability and what, or if something suddenly happened in the middle of the business, what else have I got at my disposal? So there was that feeling around vulnerability versus resilience, and in fact, I think it was around that time that I first started to realize that I couldn't just be an astrologer. I also had to carve out a way of working that was sustainable for my health and for all the other things I had to do with my life. I think that was the first time I thought I need to think about this really differently. So that was, the first thing was it could just disappear. It could go up in smoke. And then there was that other aspect of, what if Like, I'm doing this solo. I don't know anybody else it's just that feeling of isolation. Because when I'd been running the Wellbeing Centre, I had people around all the time, incredibly validating. There was a team of, I think, like 12 different people that I was subletting the treatment rooms to. So there was always a lovely person coming in saying, "Hi, how are you doing? I'm just going to put the kettle on," you know, all of that sort of thing. So that sense of isolation was very in stark contrast. And also a feeling of I know nothing, because my first business had been running premises. And as we know, when you're running an online business, well, I don't have a devoted room in my house for it. I'm sitting here talking to you at the kitchen table. So there's that sort of, I'm just here with a laptop and an idea. Who am I to be doing this? Who's gonna want to be part of this? Like it's a big ask of yourself. I think all of that starting again. So yeah, some of that was centered around money, and some of that was simply centered around my worth as an entrepreneur. And regardless of the fact I'd run a business before, it didn't feel like it helped at the time.
Yeah, you had really good business experience, but the context was so different, and all of the things around it, from, I guess, identity to, what you actually
Yeah.
do. And it's interesting that you said that it made you feel sort of scared to start in case someone took it away from you. Like, it kind of felt maybe that it was, before you weren't in a position where you could keep going with the wellness centre because of the way that, having babies is supported, like, in this country. And so it's natural maybe that that's come up, that you think, well, is this mine? Can I have this time? Can I have this business?
Yeah.
Or is somebody going to, stop me?
Yeah. Is it possible? And also, I had an incredible template to follow. Before I started the Wellbeing Centre, there were a number of others in surrounding counties that I went to visit and had treatments at. I remember, very sneaky, I won't be the first person who's done something. I went into the branch of Neil's Yard in Clifton in Bristol, and I got chatting to the receptionist, who was so nice. And I said, "Do you know what? I'm going to start a place like this one. But don't worry, it's miles away. It won't be a competitor." And I said, I just said, if I wanted to rent a room here, like, what's the process? And eventually she was so nice. She was just completely open. She told me everything about what they charged, what the conditions were. She gave me a copy of the standard contract that they used to give to their practitioners. And I had almost like a template as an exemplar to follow. And I managed to get quite a lot of information together. So I sort of had something to follow. I sort of had social proof of concept from people who'd done it before. Whereas this time with astrology, it was very much, okay, I don't know anybody doing this. And I don't have proof of concept. I just deep down, I know that this is right. And that this could be so helpful, because I bought a really terrible business roadmap. And I know I'm not alone in experiencing this either. I bought a business roadmap from a woman who's very well thought of in the business world. But her suggested strategies didn't work for me, because they were very much rooted in that very masculine, always on approach to business. And with all the other things that I do and the other jobs that I have to do in my life, I just found I couldn't work like that. Some days I was fine, and then other days I just thought, oh, do you know what? I can't face this. I can't do it. And I started, like, not showing up to the weekly Zooms where it's all, the online party, the come on everybody, put in the chat, tell me of 3 things you've done this week to make. And I couldn't face it. It was just awful. And I started to withdraw from the whole culture of it, which I found sickening. And I just thought, I can't work like this, but I'm so ambitious for this idea, and it's keeping me awake at night. I really want to do this, but I've got to find a way to make it work. So, of course, it took time to develop the idea and I suppose I started sharing sort of daily tips for astrology and then shaping it towards business astrology back almost a year ago. So yeah, it took time to develop proof of concept. And I think that I, the discussion around money is really interesting because I think that for me, when I was starting this business, money is part of a much bigger. Oh, this has reminded me. This is something I knew I wanted to talk about. Money is part of a much bigger world of numbers. And numbers are everything. When you are starting a business, and they are one of the biggest hidden parts of business development. I think that if you're like me and you're completely naive and you don't know anything, you feel these people around you apparently developing things overnight, and it's marvelous. I bought this, this course, and I did all the things, and it just turned out so amazingly well, and I made £40,000 overnight, and all those sorts of stories that you hear.
Mhm.
Money was always. I was terrible at maths at school, and that was not a good start. And in here, I feel I'm bad with numbers. It's not just I'm bad with money or I don't deserve money. It's I'm bad with numbers. And when I started to unravel my money story, and I joined a money group, a group coaching thing for a while, when I started to unravel my money story, believing that I was actually bad with money, or I couldn't seem to hold on to money, or I couldn't seem to manage money, or I never had enough money, believing that I was bad with numbers was one of them, was one of my core unconscious beliefs that I had to really think about. And money, of course, is all about numbers. That's all it is digits on a screen or a piece of paper. But the emotions it brings up are extraordinary. But I think if you believe that you're bad at maths, there's somewhere in there you could also be thinking, and money is part of that. I don't deserve to manage money, or like I'm going to make a mess of this. And money is such a precious, finite resource that I could ruin this. And if that affects everything in running a business, pricing, sale, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the hidden numbers in starting up a business are hard too. And yeah, pricing things. But when I say the hidden numbers, though, it took a long time for me to find the right courses and the right leadership within business field to start to hear some of the things I needed to hear, like people who are great at sales saying you have to keep selling through the silence. It's okay if no one sees your post or no one responds to it today. You have to keep putting it out there because out of 1,000 people who might see your stuff, only 20 of them might stop and read it. Out of those, 5 will ignore it because it's not relevant to them. Out of those, 1 might see it, oh yeah, that's sort of interesting, and then ignore it. So you just have to keep churning out the material so that on the law of averages and percentages, this, and to hear people's sales journeys and their numbers, and to start to realize about what people's engagement really looks like as opposed to what the public viewpoint is, and just how long people have had to wait before they've had any response at all. Again, that's numbers because it's time.
Yeah. And when
And
you're being sold the kind of illusion of overnight success, you feel like you're behind if it's not happening overnight almost. But actually, the
absolutely,
reality is
yeah,
it's more
the
likely to take
time,
time. Yeah.
yeah, and also things like data handling. So when you're looking at your data from Instagram engagement or from LinkedIn, for example, really being able to understand what it means and to be able to, and just to have a clear head. If you are free of emotion and you
Mhm.
can use your logical minds to look at data and really believe that I have the capability of understanding what this is trying to tell me, even if I thought I was shit at maths in year 5, then I'm going to get somewhere with this. This is going to work.
Yeah.
Not having access to numbers, and just money becomes part of that much bigger landscape.
Yeah. It's really
There's a
true
lack of self
because
trust.
a lot of people relate to, me included, that, we didn't have a lovely time in the maths classes at school. And it makes you think, I'm not good at this stuff. And that extends to metrics, statistics, data, money. digital stuff, digits, and then
Yes.
you kind of go, I'm going to stay with words because words, that makes
Yes.
sense. And then it creates this thing, oh, I can't do that world. And like you said, when you're running a business, you have to be able to sit with the numbers, which are money, and the numbers, which are metrics and data, because it's a holistic whole picture. And if you've got that story that you're shut out from this because, you were told many years ago, this is not a subject you're good at, it's really difficult there's that sort of dread of doing it. And then also, well, how can I approach it in a way that, feels, so I'd be really interested to know, actually, how did you talk about like looking at the metrics and the data, how did you kind of come to terms with like sitting with the numbers of business and it being, more inviting?
Oh, I didn't. Well, for ages,
Mm.
I just ignored them. I just ignored
Mm.
them. And then I I'm Aquarius rising, so I'm naturally inquisitive and a little bit analytical about things in the end. Usually when it's someone else's things, when it's my own, it's very different because, of course, emotions are involved. But I was just noticing lots and lots of people complaining about churning out material and content for social media, spending hours of their time, which is another aspect of the digits, spending hours of their time creating reels or doing things or, messing about with tech and making this beautiful thing for social media. Nobody saw it. And I've got to do it again
Mm.
tomorrow. It becomes this sort of, it's almost a sense of like feeding strawberries to pigs. It's like, oh my God, like it's just, I invested all of this and it's having nil effect. And yes, I'm running an online business. What else can I do? Like we all feel like we're failing. And I thought maybe there's another story here. I wonder what else is possible. This is what
Mm.
gets us out of that corner. What else is possible? And instead, I started looking at some of the data. Quite a bit of it I didn't understand, but I did quite a lot of Googling. And I'm still working on it now. It's work in progress always. But I was looking at what were my most successful posts and trying to work out what it was about those and trying to replicate that or use strands and elements from that, but also looking at the data around when my followers seem to be around and were more likely, were online, and so were therefore more likely to see things instead of just spraying and praying,
Yeah.
and sticking things out whenever. And sort of the numbers ended up helping with being more intentional with the investment of my time and my energy, which I think are also very important aspects of our personal asset. And and so I I just started deciding that rather than just being impulsive and I'm just going to post it because I'd seen loads of people doing that and it was great. I sort of thought, actually, maybe there's another way where I'm not using up a lot of my personal resources and
Yeah.
making myself feel frustrated. So I just started to look at when my people were around and Um, I still have a really thorny relationship with Instagram. I find it sort of a little bit of a strange place, but LinkedIn I find is easier, it's more straightforward, and I think I understand the way they present the figures visually in terms of having a graph there that's really easy to scan, and you can change the variables over broader or much shorter and more specific periods of time, so you can see where there's been a dip um, on like over the summer, for example, and then you can see Kelsey's. We'll understand this one. I can see that my Thursday posts almost always outperform all of the others.
Oh,
All
yes,
of those
yeah.
kinds of things. Um, and yeah, so it's a work in progress, but I decided I needed to make friends with it because I think you have to be brave sometimes.
Yeah,
Um,
and it sounds like you had your own
I could,
process. So, you tried other people's process, but actually you kind of went, well, what is there for me? Like if I look at my own post, my own data and create
yeah,
a method out of that by, it sounds like maybe refining then, like maybe Thursday posts are the highlight ones. That's the ones that
yeah,
you put more work on because you know that more people are going to see them. And
yes,
you obviously support women founders with astrology, intuitive timing, and kind of energy stuff. So I'd love to hear, like, from that perspective, what you wish more women founders understood about money, and particularly their own sort of business money.
I think we undervalue ourselves, and one of the most direct ways we do that is feeling bad about having high-end offers or increasing our pricing ever. And also, it's lovely to have an offer that, there's something there for pretty much everybody. So we all put out free stuff on social media, a lot of us do. And so there is stuff that's free to access, and then there's stuff that's paid, and that is a completely normal, you're in the business to make money and also to spend it. We do spend money in running our businesses. And so it's not about sort of accumulating your riches like Gollum. It's actually about helping money start to move into the right places, in the right direction. It's about helping. It's like the water wheel. You allow the money to come in, and you also allow some of the money to go out on things that your business needs or whatever. And it just seeing it as a moving thing, it's almost like a sort of energy thing rather than something you have to clutch onto like a static, like gold bars or something, But also, I think something I've learnt through meeting much more often now, one-to-one, with people that I've met, particularly on LinkedIn, is what's coming up in the stories and the conversations all the time is women feeling bad about the amount of time it is taking for their businesses to grow and to develop, and how hard it is to counteract the stories about overnight success that we are seeing on repeat in everybody's meta ads, and basically calling out some of the places where it's either a big lie or the person that has achieved that has been in some sort of position of privilege that some of the rest of us don't have, which means our route to wealth might be more circuitous. So when I say privilege, off the top of my head, I will say somebody who's well connected, somebody who already has a business network or a big audience. Even if they were doing something else before, that is a massive business asset to have. And it's people who know you, people who are willing to come on the journey with you as you change what you do. There will always be people who still want to hear from you. There's all kinds of privilege that we never hear about. Or, for example, somebody who's got another adult in the house or another massive source of income that sustains their lives and keeps it nice and cruisy. And so it's almost like developing the business is optional. It's a hobby. There are so many privileges that some people building business have that I don't begrudge them that at all. I think we all use whatever resources we have, but we don't always know what privilege somebody else has who maybe has pulled off the massive win overnight.
Yeah,
We
and it's
never know
like,
the whole story.
Like you said, it's it's not to knock them because it's great for them, but the line sometimes is then people are pushed into a pipeline of kind of like, well, you just need to do these things and suddenly you will be, you will get this as well. And it's nice to have aspirations, it's nice to have goals, but sometimes it gives you that kind of comparison thing where you're like, but how come I'm not there when I'm putting all this effort and I thought I was good at this and I'm not there, and I thought I would be if I just did these things. And there's a lot of hope that goes into you want that to happen, but it's not always honest necessarily. The messaging isn't always honest about what goes on. Like, we know that sometimes, I don't know, I'm just really generalizing, but to sell out like a big program, there may be a lot of ad spend, like tens of thousands of pounds of ad spend going on. So, behind the claim sometimes of, I'm not talking about anyone specifically, but that we see as adverts is, it's like, yeah, but how much did you actually get to keep, and how much was like the marketing machine that went around it? But yeah, it kind of, and that's partly why like I'm doing this podcast, is because we need to talk about like what's really going on, because so many of us are sitting here quietly like feeling things that we don't necessarily see out there. And then we're
Yes.
like, is there something wrong with me? And actually, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're going through a journey that people are also going through, maybe quietly. And it can hold you back a bit if you get stuck in the sort of shame and the fear and the feeling sorry for yourself about it, when actually it could be more a supportive message of like, of course you're not making multi-billions yet, but you're doing, you're doing your best and you're showing up, and maybe try this or try that or think more creatively about something different or whatever it is. But like, yeah, that sort of motivation to kind of keep going almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is hard, and particularly when there are natural seasonal dips in the year. In those first couple of years, you don't really see the summer coming when everybody says, oh, it's all going to go quiet. And you sort of you might hear someone say that, but until it actually happens, like, well, that can be a bit strange. Or sometimes you'll hear somebody saying, oh, in quarter four, I still can't adopt that corporate speak, which I know is part of your natural world, your natural finance habitat. But for me, it's still quite foreign. Oh, in quarter four, nobody pays attention, nobody sells anything unless it's for Christmas, because everyone's thinking about Christmas. And yet I've heard things from other entrepreneurs who said, oh God, yeah, I didn't go on, I was hardly online between Christmas and New Year. And actually I sold like 5 of my offers that were sitting there, because people are obviously scrolling at Christmas time and think, oh yeah, I fancy having that for the New Year, I'll have that. And I got money at Christmas or whatever it is, and I'm going to invest it. So I think I've learned not to assume it's always true. Like to listen and to be aware and to note, but also to say, yeah, but is that really true? Why don't I experiment and see what happens? It's okay. We hear things, but it's okay to question them a little bit and say, let's just give that a bit of a stress test and see if it's really going to happen for me too,
And we're all doing there's so many different industries and audiences that no one thing can be true across the board, because that just wouldn't be possible. So yeah, there's no inviting in that sort of curiosity around it is really important, to say like, let's experiment, because who knows what's true for my audience. Let's find out what's true and I'll learn from that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think I would ultimately, I think female founders have been sold quite a lot of stories. Some of them have a little bit of truth in, and some are just complete nonsense. And yeah, I think in those early years of business, you only see the headlines. Yeah, just, I think, remember, when it comes to yourself and money and your self-worth and your business and everything, you'll never know the whole story. You don't know what goes on indoors, and you don't know how much help somebody else might have had in getting where they've got to, or how long it really took them, as opposed to what they're telling you.
Yeah.
Because they are selling to you after all.
Yeah, there's that thing of people are putting their best version out there sometimes.
Yeah.
They're not showing.
We all do that. I washed my hair before I came on the podcast today. You're hilarious.
Yeah, that's it. It's, we put the best version forward.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you kind of a cathartic question, which is around the kind of relationship with money. So if money were a person, what would you like to say to them?
Money. You don't belong in the shadows. You have this mercurial energy that humans have made you into this topic that dwells in the shadows, this mercurial substance that some of us have it, some of us don't. Some of us have lots of emotion around you, and come out of the darkness and be this amazing tool for positive change that we can hold in our hands and with a light touch, and just say, here it comes and there it goes. And as it moves around, the more that it moves in the light, the more that it moves, the more it has capacity for positive change. But
That's
for all the
really
time, it's
evocative.
lurking there in the shadows, and it's this weird thing. It becomes a big thing in our subconscious. See, bring it out. That's why I
Bring it
love
out into
what
the
you're
light.
doing. Yeah.
That's really, really evocative and empowering. That's a really empowering kind of, motivating stance. I really love that. Really
Oh,
beautiful. I'd
awesome.
love to talk a little bit about what you do now. So just to remind people as well to make sure that you are following Kirsty. So on Instagram, it's sky___ insider.
Yes.
And LinkedIn, you want to be looking up Kirsty Anna Sinclair
Yes.
and her website, kirstyanasinclair.com. These will all be linked in the show notes, so you can just click straight through and go and check those out. And Kirsty has mentioned Sky Insider a couple of times, which is her private podcast. And I am actually I guess you'd call it like a founding member. So as soon as Kirsty launched this, I was straight in there because I had been following Kirsty's posts about the sort of daily energy and the astrology and in relation to women in the UK and business. And I am really enjoying being part of that space and her offering. And we're talking just before this about like what's different about it. And sometimes when you join something like a group program or a training, you start off feeling like really excited about it, but then very quickly you can't keep up because there's so many modules and calls and different points, and then you kind of feel really bad because you haven't done the things and you stop showing up and you're like, oh, that was a bit of a waste of time because I just couldn't do it. And what's really lovely about Sky Insider is you're not obliged to show up for loads of modules and lessons and learning, which aren't compatible with a busy life. But it's just a daily, like, short segment that tells you everything you need to know for the day, for the energy. And I find it amazing because it's not overwhelming, but there's so much wisdom in it. And I can just listen without having to get overwhelmed by going into Instagram or any sort of platform where there's loads and loads of noise. I can just press the email, listen, and I know, some steers like, it could be things like if there's a void moon coming up and that might not be the best time to send a proposal. So I can be like, oh, okay, I'll do that a bit later. Or actually, yeah, I was thinking myself, let's just sack off doing like something really heavy and do something creative. And then I realized that actually the energy of the day is saying to do that as well. And it's a really good reminder to lean into the energy of the day. And it gets me out of that rut of just thinking like I've got to trudge through tasks, and also gives me space to be like, actually, Mondays are for this, Fridays are for this. And I really love that because it gives me that variety that I don't just get sucked into things I need to do. And yeah, for me, it's really changed how I approach business and how I think about things, and that sense of, having the guidance and working with the energies, which I think is really important. We're not kind of robotic beings. We are living in cycle with, what's around us. And so I just wanted to invite Kirsty to share anything else really about Sky Insider, how you can get involved, a bit more about what it is,
Sure.
etc. as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, super easy. So there's an information page and a sign up page on my website. And Sky Insider began as my framework and solution to looking after my well-being after I recovered from burnout. And I knew I was starting a new business, and I tried lots of conventional approaches to getting more done every day. Time hack, and do your stretches while you clean your teeth, and the business equivalent of that. And I just found I was going quietly mad, trying to do more and more with fewer and fewer personal resources. And I just thought there's got to be another way. And I know that astrology is there because it understands the natural world. Any of us who spend any time in the natural world, we feel sort of held and reflected by the seasons and by what the earth and the natural environment is doing. And of course, my training in astrology was in psychological astrology, which is based on the work of Carl Jung. who, of course, had a lot of wisdom when it came to humanity and human differences. And I feel that the business world has been trying since the Industrial Revolution to treat us all as standard units rather than incredibly different and diverse and amazing individual people with individual needs. And what I've discovered through shadowing all the personal planets in the astrology range very closely over this 6 months, and obviously before that, is that astrology really has our backs. And so we all know that some days we're really on it and we feel like doing things, and other days it's just suddenly there's an energy drop off or can't concentrate on things. And astrology always has an explanation for that. And I figured rather than using astrology to explain how we felt last week and why on earth we couldn't make ourselves do things, why aren't we using it as a future planning tool? And so that's how Sky Insider developed. And so I just wanted something really agile that could fit into someone's life really easily. I don't have time to go to a separate platform or, go and read an ebook or, go on a Zoom call and, have to get dressed before I do that and nail a smile to my face when I don't feel like it. And I thought, what if every morning female founders are receiving just a little, like 10 minutes, where you can just listen, where you're drinking your tea and you listen and someone's just giving you that list, that reminder, okay, it's this day. And so the focus are these things. Here's a range of practical ways that you can use it. Here are some times where you might find that your focus just drops off. Don't feel bad. It's okay. It's natural. So get your best work done this morning because this afternoon is going to be much less focused on work and you'll find your energy is very scattered. And you can pick it up again tomorrow morning. And if somebody gives you that map ahead of time, just think how much head stuff you don't have to do anymore. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I know what's coming. And I've just got one thing to focus on today. I don't have to do all of the things. Just this one thing, this one area, this one topic. And because all the foundational bases of running a business at home are covered, like you don't have to worry about forgetting stuff or doing that firefighting thing. I wonder how often you've spoken to a business founder where it's like, oh my God, my tax, but I haven't touched my stuff since, not for months. I haven't had time. I've been doing this thing over here. And so, oh my God, I've got to get it back. And those kinds of peak points of flare-ups in business where you feel like you're running around fighting fires all the time, or you're overwhelmed because you don't know where to start. There's 7 things that you do. Astrology very carefully just organizes it for you so there isn't that overwhelm, that you've just got those touch points every single week. That means you don't fall behind with any. You've often got projects in focus and in progress, but, it helps you feel like you're sustaining your business. You've got the energy and the time to be creative and to always be open-minded about what the possibilities are. And as we've talked about at various points during this chat, when we have something that reminds us about how important that frame of mind is, that creative frame of mind, and we have a system that is helping us look after that, we can finish each week with that sense of self-congratulation that I've got the end of another one. There's probably loads more weeks in front of me, but I feel like I'm holding all those balloon strings. I've got everything together and it's not eating up my life. I've still got energy left to go and do those other lovely things tonight or tomorrow or at the weekend. I've got room in my head. I'm not tipping into overwhelm and tiredness and burnout. We're pacing
Yeah.
ourselves in a really exciting way. It just feels like we're just appending to more things that need it, but not grinding ourselves into dust. Because
Yeah.
that's not the way we're meant to live.
Yeah, it's reminding ourselves to kind of live in a more cyclical and holistic way rather than always the checklist and the what I haven't done and the pressure and the overwhelm, which then stops you probably making progress on the things you want to do. And I love that we've gone full circle
Yeah.
back to like making space for creativity, because creativity
Yeah.
is expansive and it has the answers for us,
Yeah.
when we allow that.
And actually, Harriet, that was something that you told me has that after you'd listening to Sky Insider for about a month, I remember you writing something that really touched my heart. And you said that you finally had somehow created time for the writing, that the creative writing you'd always wanted to do, and somehow hadn't made the time for, or just
Yeah.
it hadn't arrived.
It wasn't almost like I hadn't allowed it to be a priority. And because I hadn't allowed it to be a priority, it didn't get space and it didn't get done. And then as soon as I was like, actually, this is really important because I care about it and I want to do it. And actually, a lot has changed because the more I've realized for myself, the more I just lean into my interests and passions and what I want to do, the more stuff happens, like the more opportunities come up. And
Yes.
it's really interesting that sometimes actually like immersing ourselves in what we really want to do and giving ourselves permission actually makes the good stuff happen rather than just like
It's
forcing
funny how
ourselves down. Yeah.
yeah, it really unlocks stuff, doesn't it? And also, like, lots of women in business are told, listen to your body, pay attention to your intuition. But actually, many of us have been socialized for decades to not do that.
Yeah.
And so this is a method through which you're given practical ways to do that in just in little bits every day. So eventually it becomes a practice that just you pick it up effortlessly, because there's just someone there just giving you the cues at the beginning of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really amazing. So as I said, follow the links in the show notes and go and check that out and become a Sky Insider subscriber.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. I've really enjoyed this conversation. There's been so many beautiful moments and shares, and I think a lot of people are going to resonate with this and take away a lot of kind of uplifting ideas, validation around money, and really appreciate you sharing your story with us. So thank you
You're
again,
welcome. I've
Kirsty.
loved it, Harriet. Thank you.
Really brilliant. Okay. You've been listening to the Money Story Project podcast with me, Harriet Formby. If you've enjoyed the episode, please follow the show, share it with someone who might want to have a listen, and if you can, leave a review. In the show notes, you'll find links to connect with our guest and to learn more about the project itself. And if you feel called to share your own money story, you'll find details there on how to be part of a future episode. Until next time, take care and have a great day.